All right, so yeah, I'm here to present and give a sneak peek of Coindesk State of Blockchain 2017. That's our forthcoming report on the entirety of the industry for the last year. So we're going to try to go through all this information in a very short amount of time, and everybody will get to have your food. So what is Coindesk? Coindesk is a journalistic publication. We were founded in 2013. We cover blockchain technology in all its facets. We'll get into that in a little bit, exactly how we define blockchain. We have a price index for Bitcoin, which was the first blockchain. We throw major events in North America, and we're moving into research, and this is part of our free offerings for that. So that's myself and our research team. So I guess I want to lead off, and if there's anything I guess I hope people can take away from this, it's that is a framework for, I guess, putting what you've heard from previous speakers today into something that I guess sticks a little bit in your memory. It's a really complicated space. There's a lot of ideas, a lot of big words, a lot of startups with funny names. So how do we kind of look at everything? What is the blockchain technology market? So from the Coindesk perspective, we fundamentally look at three areas. So one of those is public blockchain. So that's things you might have heard of like Bitcoin, Ethereum, networks that aren't really launched or owned by any central entity, but are sort of used by an open network of users. And a key characteristics of that is they use a provably unique token. They use provably unique data to incentivize and power this internet protocol. The second category is what we would call an enterprise blockchain, or what you might have heard as a distributed ledger. So ultimately, that's a consensus network of trusted intermediaries, clients or people who traditionally kind of, I guess, communicate regularly but want to have the automation that the record keeping of these networks can provide. And then third, we have companies that do both. So we have a hybrid business model, which is companies that both use a public blockchain, have private blockchain solutions. So that's sort of the lay of the land as we see it. So breaking that down further, why sort of class things that way? So I guess ultimately we feel that what the innovators in the space are trying to create is a common platform for value exchange. And that ultimately has two sides, the public blockchain component and the enterprise blockchain component, sort of as we went to, or sort of explained in the previous slide. And these are how we divide things. So we have the public blockchains, things you might be familiar with, Bitcoin, Ethereum. The idea here is I think we believe they're similar to the internet. They're open platforms that have open participation. And the idea is that these protocols will ultimately form, again, a common layer for value exchange. Over again on the enterprise blockchain side, some more names you might be familiar with, Ripple, Chain, Hyperledger. We believe that these are more similar to like intranets, things where, I'm sure you're, from your company, you sign in to something that is like the internet, but ultimately it's a different experience, there's different permissions, and the functionality is different. So for example, you wouldn't use a corporate intranet to send an email or build a website. So I think this is what we find is a helpful framework for understanding these technologies. So that obviously takes place in different business models. So we have Bitcoin, which is a public blockchain company you might be familiar with, BitPay. They accept payments on the Bitcoin network. We have an example of what you would consider like a private blockchain company. Factum, they create enterprise blockchains and they help their partners create these enterprise blockchains. And then we have a hybrid startup, which is ItBit. They're a company that they have a Bitcoin exchange and they do enterprise blockchain. So we, again, really see these categories of delineation and groups forming around these different categories. So here's a little bit of a higher level of how this looks, because it's not just the companies, I guess, that are affected by this. There's a lot of different terms and things to understand. So here we have sort of our three main ingredients of protocols, companies, and applications. And there's a difference between each of these things, right? So Bitcoin is a protocol. It's an internet-based form of value exchange, similar to something like Ethereum, which tries to apply the same idea to decentralized applications, similar to a Zcash, which is a private version of a cryptocurrency, offers more anonymity features. So we see on the protocol level, we have a bunch of different blockchain networks that are competing on features, right? They all want open participants. They all have the ability for you to participate through things like mining. And ultimately, they're all on the same layer. And then on top of that, we see that there are companies that are built on these platforms. And there, again, we'll talk about BitPay, Coinbase, Shapeshift, companies that are building value-added layers on top of these public protocols. So again, if you think back to a previous slide where Google is built on top of the public internet, the idea here is that public blockchains may either together form something that is useful like the internet, and companies may build on top of that. And to the right here, we have enterprise, and you can see that these are kind of the same. So IBM offers its Fabric protocol, its Fabric blockchain. So it is the company that is servicing that protocol. So in this case, we see that a lot of the companies in the enterprise space are providing services on a couple layers. And I think one of the confusing points is in the public blockchain space, there is a separation there that creates, makes it somewhat difficult to understand. So I guess I'll lead in with the highlights here. So what were the 4 big things that we found, the 4 big trends in the space? So one, Bitcoin and blockchain, 2 separate ideas, at least in terms of media attention. Bitcoin is still the point of interest. Even though a lot of enterprise firms have put a lot of money and time into projects, it seems that, at least if you look at media data, people maybe care more about Bitcoin or are more interested in it. So investment has also plateaued. So we looked at investment from 2015 compared to 2016, roughly the same. We'll get into whether that's truly the case a little bit later. 3, consortiums are thriving, which is that companies, in order to investigate the space, are rapidly building up consortium networks. R3 is a great example of one, as this Hyperledger has more than 100 members now. And lastly, central banks are really getting interested in this technology. I think we're seeing around the globe that as money managers, as people who issue a unique form of data, if you can think of money like that, and manage it, they're really interested in how these systems are developing and their various robustness. So let's take a look at investment. I guess it's the best way we have, or we can think, to quantify how well these various ideas are doing in the marketplace. So if you look at investment from 2016, we neared $500 million in over 50 deals. So growth is steady and up and to the right. And I guess if there's one thing to note here, it's that there is a steady progression of investment going up. We're not really seeing any spikes quarter to quarter. We're seeing that interest in blockchain is really something that is, I guess, counter to maybe a few years ago, now happening at a very steady upward climb. Some key stats to take away is that all-time funding for what we consider blockchain projects is now at $1.5 billion, which is a huge number. That's up almost 33% year over year from our data. But can we derive any trends from this? So who's investing in what? Are Bitcoin startups getting more investment than Ethereum startups, than enterprise startups? And what we've found is there really doesn't seem to be any trends. It seems that investors are mostly split on which kind of model they think will be most disruptive. You can see from our quarter over quarter, just trying to divide the ecosystem between what Bitcoin or public startups raised and the enterprise startups. It really does fluctuate quarter to quarter. It doesn't seem like the market has a clear answer for which one they prefer. Another interesting data point is that while it's a global technology, it's a global phenomenon. We're mostly seeing investment dollars consolidated in the US, specifically in Silicon Valley, at least when it comes to public VC investment. But is this really the case? Is this really the whole story that blockchain is advancing slowly? I guess we have to introduce a new concept here, which is that it's possible for blockchain to also disrupt venture capital. So in the same way that Bitcoin takes a bunch of unique data, these Bitcoins, and sells them